Welcome to the Love Lab podcast, a safe place to get real about sex. Whether you're a man, woman, single or couple, this is the show for you because, well, sex matters. We are your hosts, Kevin Anthony and Céline Remy.
All right, welcome back to the Love Lab podcast. This is episode 49, and it is titled, How Long Should Sex Last?
And this episode is brought to you by Master Your Ejaculation, the most comprehensive, easy-to-follow program to increase your stamina, have greater control, and last longer in bed. It will retrain your ejaculatory reflexes and boost your confidence. She'll be amazed by your increased stamina. That sounds good. You can find more about Master Your Ejaculation at powerandmastery.com/master-your-ejaculation. So look it up, powerandmastery.com, Master Your Ejaculation.
Okay, so here we are, week 49, and I'm still excited about talking about sex. And I'm like fired up about this episode because I feel that we really need to do a re-education of the population and how they feel about sex and what they believe about sex. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of what I mean by that. So in prepping for this episode, obviously we have our library of sex books from all the experts in the world, and, we've studied all this stuff, but we also look to see what are people currently saying, what kind of articles have been written recently about stuff. And we came across a couple that really kind of set the tone for what most people think and feel about sex. So the first one is from GQ. I'm going to read a little quote from it. It says, and I'm just taking two different parts and sort of conflating them together. But one of them is, they're asking, how long should sex last? And it says, sex should last 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 22 seconds, the exact runtime of Wayne's World. And then in the next sentence, they say, yeah, right. While I have a lot of respect and follow-up questions for anyone who's regularly managing to bone for the duration of a feature film, of course, I'm joking. Aha! But they shouldn't be joking. All right, so I'm going to read you two more. So this one comes from thecut.com, and it says, in 2012, Kanye West successfully halted the distribution of a sex tape reportedly depicting him in flagrant with a Kim Kardashian lookalike. Instead, TMZ described the two versions its editors had seen, saying, both tapes are impressively long. The first is roughly 20 minutes, and the second is more than 40. And we're talking constant action. Seriously, the guy takes no breaks. It's incredible. Almost Sting-like. I sent the link to two friends. The male friend replied in awe. The female replied with skepticism. Even if that were possible, it'd be at least 20 minutes too much sex. The last one is from sex therapist Barry McCarthy. And he is quoted as saying, very few people have intercourse per se that goes longer than 12 minutes. Now, why do I read all of that stuff to you? Because I was shocked when researching this episode that it seems to be this common belief that sex more than about 10 minutes long is too fucking long. Are you kidding? So let me just tell you, I don't remember who wrote the GQ article, but come ask me questions, because I'm the guy that can bone for an entire feature film. No problem. And have done longer than that.
And I'm the girl who's okay with it and is like, this is awesome.
and so, I don't want this to come off about like bragging about, how long we can have sex. That's not what it's about, right? But it's about redefining your expectations of what sex can be. Mm-hmm. So let's just for 1 second define what we mean by sex for, more than 10 minutes. So when we're talking about having sex for a certain amount of time, we're actually talking about penetrative sex, penis in a vagina, or as most of these studies, when they defined it as...
It's a very sexy term.
Yeah, intravaginal ejaculatory latency time, IELT, which refers to the time it takes a person with a penis to ejaculate during vaginal penetration. It's a very scientific sounding term, but basically we just mean when you put a penis in a vagina, how long can you make love for, have sex for, right? That's what we're talking about. So we wanted to make sure that people understood that we're not talking about the entire range of sexual intercourse, which could include foreplay and oral sex and talking and massage.
And the cuddling afterwards.
And the cuddling, yeah. We're talking about the penis goes in and you're having sex.
So if we go back to our title, how long should sex last? Ultimately, I think that it should last as long as you want. And you're the one who chooses. And that's the thing. This is a very, very important point that we're making here. You choose. It's not your body who's choosing for you, like, oh, must come right now, needs to ejaculate. Or like, it's not your man who decides how long it lasts because he's done. It's like how long do you want it to last? And that's a really important reframe.
Yeah, and I also want to say too, and you can talk more about this when you talk about from the female perspective, but like the woman in that one quote that I read, she was skeptical and she said, even if that were possible, it'd be at least 20 minutes too much of sex. Now, my personal feeling is, because we've researched this pretty well, and we've seen a lot of comments from people who are saying that that's too long. And my personal belief is, if you think that that's too long, you've never had good sex.
Absolutely. You're not having great sex, that's for sure.
You're not. You may think you've had good sex, but you've never really had good sex if you think sex for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half is too long.
Yes, I would have to agree with that. I want to give some more numbers just for the sake of it before we get into different views around what sex looks like, in terms of lasting for women versus men. There was a study published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, and we found different years for it, anywhere between 2005 and 2008 that they did those studies. So, it's a little bit old, but it still gives us some idea. So what they did, they asked random sex therapists their opinions on how long sex should last. And what they come up with, they rated penetrative vaginal sex that lasted from 1 to 2 minutes as too short, you think. Sex that lasted 10 to 30 minutes as too long. 10 minutes? Really? I mean, I take more time to eat.
That is insane. 10 minutes is too long.
Well, and it's 10 to 30 minutes. But by the way, any type of movies nowadays is like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So people would rather spend time watching something stupid on TV rather than making love. Anyway, meanwhile, the adequate sex lasted 3 to 7 minutes. And desirable sex lasted 7 to 13.
So, the only positive that I can think of in this entire discussion so far is that when you look at some of the old research that was done, and it shows that the average man only lasts about 5 to 7 minutes, or 3 to 5, depending on which study it was. And then you read this that says, desirable sex is 7 to 13. Well, first of all, you're already outside the 5 to 7, even if you're giving the guys credit, which means the guys aren't lasting as long as even the women are saying right now that they think is the right number. But at least it's not that far away. The only positive I can come up with is that what most people are capable of is at least somewhat in the ballpark of what most people think. The problem, however, is that what most people think is extremely limiting. They don't understand how they're intentionally setting the bar so low for themselves.
Yeah. I'm speechless. I'm just shaking my head here for the audience and I don't even know what to say. This is so sad.
It is sad, and that's why I got really fired up when researching this and wanting to talk about it, because honestly, if you're in that camp where you think that 10 to 30 is too long and that 3 to 7 is desirable, you really need to redefine what sex means. Because, and we've talked about this many times on the show, there are places of bliss and ecstasy and energy that you just cannot get to without at least 30 to 40 minutes of good sex.
So now that we're on the subject, so what I'm curious about, I want to share a women's perspective on how long you want sex to last. And obviously it is my perspective. So it's my opinion. You take it, live it, do whatever you want with it. But ultimately, I think that, if we approach sex as a thing of like, it's a marathon, it has this amount of like, yeah, I've got to go for this length, for this duration, and you're so focused on the goal, it takes away from the experience. But I also think that if you're thinking, okay, this has been long enough as a woman, which happens a lot, you're definitely not getting the kind of sex that you want and like. And I think that's also when it comes in, I think we women have a responsibility to speak up. Speak up for what we want, for what we desire, and also for like asking for more. I think as a principle, as the feminine, we help to bring out the best in the masculine. When we hold higher standards, the men show up for us. And it's essential that we do that as well in the bedroom. So if we start to demand sex that is longer or a different type of sex, because I agree, an hour of full pounding might be a little too long. Like, my vagina is not a full yes to that. Let's just put it that way.
Not always. Sometimes it is.
Well, when I'm ovulating, yes, that's true. Okay, but the bottom line is, sex is not just penis inside vagina and going really quickly. There's different things that can happen while keeping penis inside vagina. You can vary the tempo and vary the positions, and you can breathe together, look into each other's eyes.
The angle, the motion.
Absolutely.
Stillness.
Yes. Actually, some of the best moments in sex happen when you don't do anything. And what I've noticed is the more I chase something, whether it's an orgasm, a sensation, the more it kind of like goes away, or then it comes too quickly. I'm either pushing it away or I make it come too quickly. And the more I am still, then I'm not trying to make something happen, which then takes me on a ride. And I think that's what is really amazing when you are able to get to that place of like, hey, I don't have a set mindset of what things should look like. Show me where today goes. And, I'm just thinking about it as an analogy too. There are things that you do every single day, probably like eating and brushing your teeth and showering. And, sometimes the shower, the water gets really hot and you have to put it on a lower setting in order to make it sustainable so you can stay in that hot steam for a little while longer. Sometimes the water is like not as hot and you have to go lower on the level to bring more hot water. And I feel like it's kind of similar to your sexual energy and when you're in the bedroom, you have to adjust with where you're at. And sometimes you're feeling hotter than others. Sometimes you are more motivated for it. And ultimately, it's really about being in the present. So that's my very lengthy definition of how long sex should last. But I'm also going to say one more thing before I give you the mic again, Kevin. Is honestly, anything below 20 minutes, it's not even worth calling lovemaking, in my opinion. I mean, it's a quickie. And I don't reach higher states unless we get to that 20, 30, 40 minutes mark.
Yeah, and I would like to say, like, if somebody's listening to this and they're hearing Céline say, well, I just don't get to the States unless I've been 20, 30 minutes, some of you are probably thinking already that there must be something wrong with Céline, because you're thinking, well, you can get there in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 7 minutes even. But you have to realize that the levels that she's talking about are most likely much higher than where you go in your 7 or 10 minutes. So you have to understand that. So yeah, we consider 30 minutes
a quickie.
A quickie. That's kind of our cutoff. Like if we make love more than 30 minutes, we're like, okay, that's decent. 40 minutes, 45 to an hour. That's like a good, nice lovemaking session. That's not overly long and it's not a quickie. Anything less than 30 minutes is an absolute quickie. There's just no doubt about it. The time that it takes to generate the energy flow and to raise yourself to these other states, it just takes time and it can't be rushed. Like you said, you can't force it.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I guess it depends. If all you're doing is making love, and you are constantly in a state of bliss and turn on, and you have no pressure from outside, you don't need to make money, you don't need to be somewhere or take care of other people. Yes, fine. You might be in that constant state, and you may not need as long. But because of the world we live in, we have stressors, we have outside demands, we have so many things that happen. It takes a little while to settle in.
From a guy's perspective, you know, I want to make love for as long as the two of us are really enjoying it. And there's tons of things that you do. Like if you're a guy and you enjoy watching sports, do you want to watch 10 minutes of a football game, or do you want to watch 3 hours of a football game? Well, most of you would say 3 hours. Why? Because it's fun to watch. And the longer you watch, the more fun you're having, right? It's the same thing with sex. Like, do you want to have sex for 5 minutes? Or would you rather have that same and potentially higher levels of enjoyment and satisfaction and fun for a longer period of time? So it's like, okay, I could have sex for 10 minutes and that was enjoyable. Or I could have that same level of enjoyment, but enjoy it for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour. And most likely, it's not even going to be the same level. It's going to be an even higher level than where you were before. So for me, as long as the two of us are actively engaged and connected to each other and enjoying it and having fun and both wanting to be there and both enjoying taking the energy to new levels, then there's really no limit. I mean, I think our current limit is about 6 hours. But that really, I ended that because I realized I had to go home and go to work. And there have been other times, that have been very, very long. And were we trying to go that long? No, we didn't even have any idea that it had been that long. It's just that we were in that flow and we were just enjoying every moment of it, riding that roller coaster up and down and up and down. And it didn't matter how long it was.
So the question often people say, so why would you want to have sex for that long? That's usually what people tell us.
Oh, yes. We've had that question posed to us multiple times. Why would you want to do that?
Why not? But I think it goes beyond that. So if we start to see sex as a place to release stress, not through an ejaculation or orgasm that releases stress, but as a place to convert stress, from the sex you're having, you are releasing deep stresses, you are getting into a peaceful state. But the sexual energy that you are generating can start to supercharge your body. And it can boost your sexual health, your mental sharpness, your sense of well-being, of self-esteem. And we'll get into the benefits of sex in a while. But when you start to view sex as a place to recharge your batteries, rather as a place to just release tension or have a microsecond of fulfillment, then you start to see that it's better to go for something that's a little longer, because it needs a little bit more time to start to develop those benefits and generate enough energy to get to those places.
Yeah, and this comes back to a statement I made more towards the beginning of the show, which is that anybody that thinks that, sex from, 7 to 13 minutes is too long, or whatever the number was, I don't remember off the top of my head, that it's because they're not having great sex. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you look at sex as something that you have to do because your partner wants it, or you want to make your partner happy, or
you want to have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, maybe you just want to have a quick orgasm and have a good night's sleep. Or, in other words, if you're looking at sex from those points of view, then I can understand why you would probably only want 7 to 10 minutes of sex. If sex with your partner is really not very good and it's really not that enjoyable and it becomes a chore, then I get it. And honestly, I personally believe that most of the people who are answering in that range are doing it because, or saying that range because their sex really isn't good, and it's most likely a chore that they just do because that's what they're supposed to do.
I read some comments online too that some people were like, if you take more than 2 minutes, it means she's not hot enough. And I was like, what is that? Like, if you're thinking that if he takes too long to come, it's because you're not worthy or you're not hot enough. Or if he thinks like, hey, I'm taking too long, it's her. Like, this is the stupidest idea ever.
I was just going to say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can't, that's, by the way, super important. And I teach that a lot to my clients. You can't link your self-worth to your partner's orgasm.
Well, so there are some women who believe that the faster they can make a guy ejaculate, the more powerful they are.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't always consciously realize that they're doing this. But if a woman is with a man and he's constantly having premature ejaculation, one of the things that we teach is look at yourself as the woman and see, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Are you pulling him over the edge intentionally? Mm-hmm. Is this a way for you to show how powerful you are? Because sometimes that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
It ultimately always leads to your own disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole nother thing.
Okay, so I want to bring one more point that I think is crucial. And it's a massive reframe that sex ends when you're satisfied, when you feel complete. Sex doesn't end because there's an ejaculation or an orgasm. We've already talked about this in numerous shows that ejaculation and orgasms are two different things and they can be separated. And a lot of women listening probably can relate. We don't always have orgasms with intercourse. As a matter of fact, some women are just totally fine. I'm fine if I don't have an orgasm per se when I'm having sex. It's just about the connection. And for some, it like they can't grasp their mind around that. And so the only way to end sex is through that ejaculation and or orgasm. So when we are doing sex for the sake of connecting, generating energy, and elevating ourselves through the love, because it's called love making. And in ancient times, it was considered a blessing to be next to newlyweds people because, they would make love. And it was thought that the neighborhoods would benefit from this extra love that was being generated.
I know ours does.
I'm not quite sure that there's somewhere that absolutely love the acoustics of it, but,
But they're benefiting whether they realize it or not.
That is correct. It inspires them. We do inspire. Okay, back to my point. So it doesn't need to end, right? In that, completion of the orgasm or ejaculation. Sex ends when you feel complete. And it's such a weird concept. Sometimes I just go I tell Kevin, and I'm like, okay, I'm done now. How about we just snuggle? And he'll pull out, he'll still have an erection, and everything is fine. And this is one of the biggest things that we focus on in our coaching and even working either in our courses or one-on-one with clients is to start for people, both men and women, to understand that concept. Because if you start to really understand it, it changes how you approach lovemaking. It really does. And that's why I thought it was so important to bring this point in this show for you to realize if there's one thing that you're going to take away from today's show, it should be that sex should last as long as you want it and you end it whenever you choose it. And the end is not the ejaculation or the orgasm.
Absolutely. That was so perfectly stated. There's no need to restate it. But I will say, with all of our talk about, hour-long, multi-hour-long, we're not saying that you're terrible at sex if you can't make love for that long. The idea is to just basically give you an idea of what's possible and then take it as far as you want to take it.
Absolutely. Now, sometimes we have quickies, like we have a 10 minutes quickie, and it's mostly those that happens in odd location at weird times where it's just really animalistic. Those, for us, never end in an ejaculation.
Nope.
Never. Because the whole goal there is really just to like plug in, put it in, and have that quick sex, knowing that it's just a few minutes, so like 5 to 10 minutes. I was like, oh my God, that was so cool. We did that, and we're on the couch, or we're in the middle of the kitchen, or like, you just kind of let yourself be a little bit of an exhibitionist in your own house, and that's fun, and it gets the energy going. And then we know that we'll get back to it later and make love for longer.
Yeah, and really the key to being able to do any of this, at least from a guy's perspective, is you have to learn how to separate your orgasms and your ejaculations. You have to master your ejaculation. You have to be able to decide if and when you ejaculate. That's the key to the whole thing. Women, they can have sex, they can have as many orgasms as they want, they can have sex for as long as they want. There's really no issue there. But for us guys, there is, this fact that if we ejaculate, we will lose an erection and we will have a refractory period. So for us, the key really is learning how to separate those two and then have total control so that we decide when we want to and when we don't want to.
Absolutely. And if you last less than it takes for your woman to climax, then you're ejaculating too early. And that's the truth. That's how we define like premature ejaculation. It's not like it's basically if you can't last as long as she needs you to last to be inside her for her to come, you're coming too quickly.
Yeah, and science will define it differently, right? They're
Yes.
like, less than a minute or whatever it is. But no, our definition is if you can't last as long as your woman needs you to, for her to be satisfied. And maybe it's for her to have an orgasm, or maybe it's just for her to feel fulfilled and satisfied.
Yes.
But whatever it is, you have to be able to last long enough so that you both walk away from the experience feeling complete.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you're in a new relationship, we kind of enter a different reality. And I know that at the beginning of a relationship, it doesn't really matter if we get lost in each other's for hours and we explore each other's bodies and we can talk past midnight and tell each other secrets and then make love and again and again. And it's like, woohoo. And then you fast forward a few years and you're living together and then you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we have to do something for that long. And I think it's really important to remember the joy you had at the beginning to discover each other's body, to explore things together. And even if you've been together for several years, you can still be surprised by your partner. And it is a trap that many people fall in where they believe this is the box that my partner fits in, it's square like this, and these are the limitations, and nothing else can fit, like they just fit in that box. And if you approach sex and your partner and your relationship from a place of like, okay, well, they usually look like this, but I wonder how they're going to show up today, or what could be different, or I'm going to look at his eyes in a different way or feel his ass differently, like whatever that is, then you can bring in that element again of surprise, of newness that makes you want to be in it for longer.
After the years that we've been together and, even past relationships, I have never gotten to the point where I thought that sex was too long. Like, even years into relationships, I was never at the point where, we have to make love for a whole hour, Like, that's just never happened. Usually I'm the one going, You're done already? Oh, okay.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's important to be like, I've been at times where it was really hard for me to get out of my head, and I acknowledged it. And I said, hey, okay, honestly, I can't stop thinking about whatever, like this article I'm supposed to write, or this deadline, or this or that. And like, it's in the way. and I can't be fully present. And sometimes we go like, just verbalizing it helps. Or sometimes we say, okay, let's take a break. You go finish it and then we come back. Or sometimes we change position or go for different sensations. And I'm like, what article? I forgot all about it. So we want to leave you with some really things to look forward to. And what would be better than giving you 12 reasons to have more and longer sex? Because we want to let you, we want you to want it, right? So you want to have more and longer sex because it strengthens the immune system. It boosts your libido. It lowers the blood pressure. It helps your body to get in better physical condition. Yeah, that hot ass. It helps prevent heart disease and heart attacks. And by the way, that's true. Like, there's studies on that. Yeah. Promotes better sleep. Makes you look younger. Much cheaper than some of the creams that we buy. It improves your brain function. It reduces stress, reduces the risk of prostate cancer. And by the way, speaking of which, prostate massage works really well too. So make sure you listen to our episode on prostate massage. It's in way back in the beginning. And so look for that one. It also puts you in a happier mood. You're nicer to be around and people want to be around you. And it increases the intimacy and makes your relationship stronger.
Yeah. And if we really sat down to write a longer list, we could write an even longer one than that. There are so many benefits. There's so many reasons why you should desire to last longer, to have longer lovemaking. I mean, there's just so many benefits. Why wouldn't you? So I would say, if you're listening to this and you're a guy and you're thinking, okay, you've convinced me, like, I want to figure out how to do this, but how? Then go to powerandmastery.com, go to Master Your Ejaculation, and take that course. Learn how to separate your orgasm from your ejaculation. Learn there are methods in there. There are tools that you can use. There's a ton of information in there. Figure out how to do it for your benefit and for hers. And I would say, if you want to go the next step further, when we talk about this long sort of tantric lovemaking with these waves, and take our sexual mastery course, because that's going to take you to the next level. It's one thing to separate your orgasm and ejaculation. It's another thing to figure out, how do you really have this out of this world, fucking amazing, mind-blowing, just amazing sex that literally transports you to another dimension. And it's all in there in those courses.
I hope you're as inspired as I am.
For us, we're so passionate about this because we know the potential that great lovemaking has. We know the potential it has to help the individual. We know the potential it has to help the relationship. And we know that when those healthy, happy, and horny individuals make great relationships, they also take that out into the world and they make a better world.
And we love that vision.
And so we really want to empower everybody who's listening here to have the best sex they can possibly have, and then take the positive energy from that and share it with the fucking world.
Hallelujah.
All right, everybody. We hope you are inspired. I know I certainly am. And we should probably end this really right now. All right, everybody, that's all the time we have, and we will see you next week. We hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoyed this show, leave a comment and share it with your friends.
And if you want more, we have an entire digital library with the best sex tips and relationship advice at CelineRemy.com. That's CelineRemy.com. So join us in the Sex Vault to continue this adventure.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, you're amazing.